Our fourth speaker, Toastmaster Rajesh, when I asked him what he thought was a great leader quality trait, he said stoic, which I thought was absolutely wonderful when you think of people like Nelson Mandela, who were in prison for a number of years and then come out to be the leader of their country. Anything can happen when you're a great leader. So I'd now like to invite Toastmaster Rajesh to join us and share with us his speech, which is Controlling Your Fear. Controlling Your Fear, Toastmaster Rajesh, over to you.
Am I audible? Just a minute, let me set this up, please. Am I audible again?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hope you sound.
Thank you. Could you spotlight the timer for me, please, if it's okay? Ah, there we go. Perfect. Alrighty. Everything before me was a haze, veiled by a thick, unfallen wad of tears. My faithful, trusted tummy was awash in what I only could guess was some really strong acid. I had no knees, no legs or feet. I imagined there was some wetness below my belt. The loudest sound in my ears was the sound of a whole herd of dinosaurs stomping past. In other words, my heartbeat. But beyond that swamp and thunder, I caught feeble glimpses of smiles. I heard what I could only guess were applause, maybe cheers and laughs, and someone even calling out my name nicely. And gladly, I hadn't wet my pants. It looked like I had finished my task, and as I waited there in the middle of nowhere, between here and there, I felt the gentle hand of my class teacher on my shoulder as she escorted me off the stage. I was 8 years old, and I had just recited a poem, a funny ditty, and the first time I'd ever done so in front of all the parents, the teachers, and students of my primary school annual day function. Toastmasters of the day, my dear friends and welcome guests, for something that happened when I was 8 years old, I mean, this thing is still one of the freshest, rawest memories in my memory baggage. This fear of having to speak in front of an audience. The fear of public speaking. Yeah, and you know what? It's also got a fancy name. It's called glossophobia. And the funny thing about glossophobia, the fear of public speaking, is that many decades after that first outing, every single time that I've gone onto stage to speak, I've always felt that fear, that wrangling of the tummy, that cold sweat, that fear of things happening outside or beyond my control. In fact, 3 years ago, when I first stepped on the podium at the Emirates Toastmasters meeting to attempt my first ever table topic, the same thing happened. I was struck by fear. And we've already heard this a gazillion times, right? I mean, we got all the statistics up and about. It's the greatest fear, greater than death. Everybody feels it. We've seen the fancy statistics over there. But there's one common thing to this, about this fear of public speaking, which is that every single one of us faces it, especially for the new speakers out here. You're not alone. I face it. Just before I switched on the camera over here and I listened to Ian inviting me on stage, I felt that little pit of fear boiling down in my stomach. It happens. And I believe that's the sum total of all of where it ends. In the sense, it's got a very fancy name, glossophobia. It's a fear of public speaking, and that's all the fear there is. So what we want to talk about here is how do we manage this fear? Why does this fear happen? And then how do we manage this fear so that we become better communicators? And so we have something called as anxiety triggers or fear triggers. And research shows that it's natural to feel the fear or to have that instinct of fear, because it's basically built into our DNA. Prehistoric man would consider himself, or would turn to fear if he wants to escape from predators, if he's alone, if he's in a new and strange situation. So the first things first that we realize, or we want to understand about fear, is that it is ultimately just an instinct. It's an instinct that drives you away from new situations or unknown situations. And let's face it, standing in front of a stage and delivering or trying to deliver a speech to an audience is a fearful situation. You are separated, you're alone, you have the whole world watching you, and you have no idea what the perception of that world is, and now you need to deliver. The first response that you would think about is to fly. And then we've evolved. Of course, we are no longer prehistoric men or women. And so we have got additional fears that come that built in. Number one among them is the risk of failure. Hey, what if I fail in whatever I'm setting out to do over here? Second is, will I look bad? Am I going to look foolish? What will people think of me? So on and so forth. And third, of course, is, will the audience get bored? As I hope you are not at this point in time. We'll finish this quickly, but that's another fear that we may have, that we are not living up to the expectations of what the audience holds for us. So these are possibilities, but the common thing about all these fears is they're either instinctual, in the sense they are deep down, probably subconscious, or in most cases, these fears are perceptions, something that we build into ourselves, may not necessarily be the truth at all. So the first or the best thing that I usually do is I go in there thinking that no, fear need not be the case. That's the first step towards managing fear itself. And once we recognize the fact that this fear is natural, that it need not be true, and it can be managed, let's talk about how we can actually go about managing fear or anxiety of public speaking. In my experience, and as far as I know, the best or number one tool to managing anxiety and fear is perhaps experience. An experience you gain by doing three things. First, prepare. And I'm a strong believer in this. Nothing beats fear more than preparation. You cannot be enough prepared for any public speech or speaking opportunity that you take. And to prepare, you want to take care of two things, or you want to be cognizant of two things. One is you should have sufficient domain expertise, which means you should know what you're speaking about. Have you ever wondered that why icebreaker, for example, is the first speech in a Toastmasters journey? Of course, it is an opportunity for you to introduce yourself, but I like to think that the first speech that you are required to deliver in front of Toastmasters audience is about a subject that only you would know and you would know best, which is yourself. That automatically brings in that confidence because you are an expert in what you're going to speak about. And that by itself builds a strong platform for you to fight the element of fear. So when you are preparing a speech, you need to be sure that you are well informed of what you're going to speak about. You usually and normally will speak best about the things that you know best. If it is a subject that you are not very conversant with, then it is your responsibility to prepare, to research, and to make sure that you know as much as you can about that subject. The second thing that you do to prepare is to write your speech conscientiously and correctly. So, and put in that effort to structure your speech. Now, structuring a speech and bringing it in is a whole different learning within the Toastmasters or in public speaking itself. But you owe it that effort, because what happens then is once you have your speech structured, once you have your speech built upon content that you're an expert of, and you're able to write that speech, you are now then prepared. When you're prepared, you are able to fight fear better. But you may have expertise, you may have written a great speech, but you still have to deliver it well. And to deliver the speech, again, the best thing that you could do is to practice it. And that practice is what builds your experience in speaking itself. And practice comes in, again, two forms. When you write a speech for a subject, for an occasion, try and practice it to yourself, perhaps in front of a mirror, perhaps on audio or a video recording, but do it over and over again. I have a 6 and 60 rule when I need to practice my speech. So any speech that I deliver, I make sure that I practice it 6 times within 60 minutes. So in an hour, I'm practicing it over and over again 6 times. And that kind of helps me to know how the speech flows, where I have to iron it out, so on and so forth. It helps me to gain confidence on the content that I'm going to deliver in front of my audience. And again, that's one way of practicing. And another thing that you could do in terms of practicing is grab as many speaking opportunities that you can. Familiarity breeds content. Strike content breeds confidence. So the more to build confidence, take the opportunity that you have. As a Toastmaster, you have innumerable opportunities to deliver your speech. Grab them and go for it. But Toastmasters is not the only occasion or the opportunity you have to deliver a speech. You could deliver a speech anywhere else. At work, if you have an opportunity to do a presentation or to do anything as a public speech, grab it, take it on with both hands, and make sure that you take that and do it. The more you do it, the more familiar you become with it, the more confident you become with it. So practice makes you more confident. And the third thing that you could do to gain experience and also in preparation is to reach out, because nothing helps you than the hands of your peers and your mentors, because they will be able to tell you, again, from an external perspective, which the external perspective, for example, that the audience that you're going to face at a certain point, they will be able to give you a spotlight or a concise feedback in terms of how you are doing as a speaker. And that allows you to manage your preparation itself. So number one is the number one way to overcome or to manage your fear or anxiety is to build experience. And experience you build with preparation, conscientious, objective preparation, with practice, rigorous, continuous, consistent practice, and by seeking out and reaching out to your peers and mentors for external feedback. So that's let's say, the tangible stuff. I've also experienced that to manage anxiety, you probably want to have a winner's or a confident mindset. And how do you manage this mindset? So one way to manage fear is to tell yourself, your mind and your heart, that you're going to do well. Some of the things that you could do over here is to use positive visualization techniques. So in the sense, let's leave the jargon out of it, or let's leave the complexities out of it. Just be positive. And it helps you and it helps your audience to be positive. Remember all those perceptions that we had? Am I going to do good? Am I looking good? Am I capable? Am I able? These are not necessary when you go on to give a speech. Because remember, the audience is there so that because they want to listen to you. They're looking forward to hear what you have to say. And you may not believe this yourself, but you're way, way better than you yourself give credit for. So dwell on that and be positive. Go in there with an objective to making that happen. That helps. Second is, I found that this helps me, and perhaps it may help you too, to get that positivity. I don't ever look at it as a public speaking exercise. in the sense it's not a public speech for me. I'm not speaking to this amorphous mass called a public. For me, it's a conversation. It's not a performance, it is a conversation. And regardless of how many people are there in that audience, for me, it is still a one-on-one conversation. I may be having that one-on-one conversation with 1,000 people, but it is literally a conversation that I'm having between me to them. In fact, I go so far as to identify individuals in that audience. If I'm a complete stranger to that audience, I would still do that. You will never miss to find a friendly face or a curious face or an inquisitive face or an inquiring face in that crowd. Look for those faces, make that connection. It also helps in your body language because you're making eye contact around the audience. You're also building that connect with the audience and you're trying to speak one-on-one. But again, the idea over here is instead of considering your audience as this block, try and think of them as individuals who are sitting there willing and listening to you, to what you have to share on that occasion that you're giving a speech. These two things really help me to manage my anxieties when I'm speaking up on stage. Another thing that you could do is, so we talked about preparation, we've talked about managing the mind or the psychology of managing anxiety or fear. Another thing that helps is, for want of a better word, physical and mental fitness, or to bring your body and mind in sync so that you can go on and deliver the speech. Now, this has come about quite often, and you will hear this very often in any forums that is being spoken about. It helps to calm yourself down before you go on to deliver your speech. And to calm yourself down, there are a couple of things you can do. Exercise helps. If you are a physically fit or active person, it helps you to manage your functional efficiencies in that sense. So you're less prone to becoming nervous. You're less prone to kind of losing it, as you would say. It helps to have breathing exercises and breathing techniques. For example, the simple experience, and I do that too before I step onto stage, the simple experience of taking a few conscious breaths before you get onto the stage allows you to calm your body as well as your mind. It also helps if you have a pre-speech routine. So I, for example, I'd make sure that I have a certain favorite set of clothes, for example, or I make sure that my desk is clean in an online environment. I make sure that my shoes are shined, for perhaps, but that you could have a certain set of pre-speech routines that you would do. Memorize the speech. You've already memorized the speech, run it through, go through the bullet points, say a happy phrase, for example, that'll trigger your mind into thinking that you're going in to deliver and to do something good, something beneficial for yourself as well as for the audience that is out there waiting to hear you speak. And so these are the three things or the three main ways in which we could talk about how to manage your anxiety. So let me go through them again. So number one is, just to recap, first, fear is normal. It is normal. It is instinctual. It is you being you as a human. It is to be expected. It is better. You do not need to cave into that fear. What you want to do is to manage the fear itself. The fear works in your favor if you're able to manage the nervous energy. It helps you to kind of bring in your best in that event. To manage that fear, what you want to do is three main things. One is you want to build your experience in public speaking itself. And experience comes when you prepare well, when you practice well, and when you reach out to both your audience as well as to your mentors and peers. Another way to manage your anxiety is to make sure that you're visualizing, you're mentally tricking yourself into believing that you're going to do something good or you are sharing something beneficial. So be positive, have that positive mindset, have that willingness to do what you need to be doing at that time. Consider it as a conversation and not a performance. You're not out there to win an award. You're out there to exchange information or put out your point of view. Try and do some breathing exercises, and keep yourself fit in that sense to make sure that your body as well as your mind are relaxed and you're able to then get onto stage and manage yourself in terms of delivering that public speech. And remember always that your audience does not notice what you feel are your failings or your limitations or what you or anything that you have missed. The audience does not. The audience is looking forward to hearing from you and learning from you and sharing that experience with you. Use these methods and build up your own confidence. That brings me to the end of my keynote speech, and I shall now hand it over back to the TMOD.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. Excellent wisdom shared with us all, and certainly I'm going to take a few tips from that to become a better speaker. Hopefully, that's my goal. Now,